Welcome to Popcorn Planet. I'm so happy to be with you guys today on a Tuesday, and boy, have we got a panel for you. Ladies and gentlemen, so happy to have It's Kim back. Always a pleasure, Kim. I hope you are doing well, but look at this panel of two experts from one here and one across the pond. Oh my gosh, it's UK versus US. We got our own Christopher Melcher, attorney at law, and the black belt barrister himself. Daniel Shen Smith is here. Oh my gosh, it's gonna be a great conversation. Welcome everybody. Let's start with you. Welcome to our new guest, Daniel. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you very much. How are you?
We are great. I'm excited to have you here. We get to talk about the UK versus the US with our very own US's Christopher Melcher. Mr. Melcher, how are you?
Well, great. And it's cool to be on the panel with you, Daniel, and I enjoy your videos and especially the breakdown of UK versus US, or I'm sorry, the UK judgment and the kind of illogical conclusions that the court had made. So great work.
Yeah, this is going to be fun, Kim, isn't it? Because now so many people are using the UK trial as evidence as to why Amber is the winner. And I thought Daniel's breakdown was fantastic, and it'll be nice to have both these legal. We can all now have a conversation to finally end this. But before we get there, Kim, first of all, how are you? Congrats. Monetization's almost on her way, Kim. Yay.
Thank you.
Everything good for you, Kim?
Sorry?
Everything going well with you?
It is. I actually just finished editing my next video. It should be going up in a couple of hours, so I'm very excited about that. Yeah.
Oh, we all got channels. Subscribe to them all. In fact, it's always good. I'm gonna do my subscribe plug early. Hit the bell, smash the like. Make sure you do it. All our channels, mods. Please share Kim's link, Daniel's link, Christopher's link. We all got channels we hopefully will support, and I look forward to you checking out all of our content. Kim's, check out hers first next. Now, before we get to this, I want to talk about the ACLU. Before we even get there, I have to mention, everyone's been sending to me, Johnny is now on TikTok and Instagram, and he posted his first TikTok, which was sort of a message to the fans as he this B-roll that's coming in here. To all my most treasured, loyal, unwavering supporters, we've been everywhere together. We have seen everything together. We have walked the same road together. We did the right thing together because you cared. And now we will all move forward together. You are, as always, my employers. And once again, I am whittled down to no way to say no thank you, to say thank you, other than to just say thank you. So thank you, my love and respect. Hold on. Yes, hold on 1 second. I'm walking out of my office right now. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, I've been on hold. That's why I'm late for all this. Kim, give a reaction. What do you think of Johnny's speech right here?
Oh, I love it. I love that there's this transparency now that's happening. I think this is one of the really nice things sometimes about celebrity and social media, that there is now, I feel like a lot of celebrities are able to take some of their own narrative into their own hands, and they're able to say what it is they really want to say, as opposed to necessarily having to go through a publicist. And I'm sure that this has been okayed by like a team of people around him and everything else, but it's nice to be able to hear from Johnny and not have to like read it in People magazine, for example. I think it comes across a lot more authentic, and we get to hear, what he really has to say. So it's very sweet. And I'm glad that he knows that he has a lot of people supporting him. That makes me pretty happy. So I do want to say just to everybody in the chat, I want to thank you all for your patience. As I was saying in the chat before, there's a lot going on behind the scenes right now, and I do apologize for the lateness, but we are here and we're going to have a great show now. And I think it's totally worth the wait for the two gentlemen that are here. Oh my goodness. Hello. I wanted to ask the both of you, Mr. Melcher and I were speaking before the show started, and we were just saying, how this story has just engulfed so much of us and what we're planning on doing moving forward and what we think this is going to look like moving forward. So I'd like to ask each of you what you feel about that and how you think moving forward things are going to be, and maybe what your favorite part of this whole experience has been of following this case over the past 8 weeks or so.
Well, Christopher, you first, please.
Well, it's been fantastic for me to see the engagement in the legal process, because that's really the main reason why I'm doing this, is because of my passion for the law, and then anyone else who's interested in legal process. I just love to see that, and because these are our courts, these are our justice system. And the more that you know about it, the more power you have or protection you have. So I love the engagement. And it was a very fascinating story, but it's coming to a close. And, some of this stuff is kind of hard to die, but obviously we're going to move forward. The parties need to move forward, as hopefully they'll both do. Coming up, we're kind of looking at other stories. For me, one of that I've been following is Brangelina, the Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie story from the get-go. So I may do some further work on that, because unfortunately those parties have been unable to resolve their differences, and that's just kind of an ongoing dispute for many years.
Indeed. And likewise, what I've taken from this is, as you say, Christopher, an indulgence in the law and the process of the law. And I talked a little bit about this in a live stream earlier today, and I think I've touched on it in some videos. There is this engagement between the law and the process, and then what people see and perceive to be justice. Because there was an interesting question came up in a live stream, which was, what do I think about the law and the procedure and justice? And it's interesting that those are phrased as separate things, because most people would think that they all are coined within one thing. But the example I gave in response to that was, if someone doesn't follow the procedure correctly, or if they don't apply the law quite correctly, they may not get the same result. And many people may not see that as justice, because there should really only be one outcome. But the outcome depends on a fair process and a fair application of law. But then when you think about how the law is applied and how the process is followed or not, by way of example, and I'm sure we'll touch on it with the UK Depp trial, with certain points that were not put in cross-examination. And this is a really key point, because if certain points are not put in a cross-examination, you cannot make that statement to a jury, and a judge will not consider it. So to think about that, if you want to say that someone is being dishonest about something, as Christopher, you will well know, if you want to say that someone is mistaken, dishonest, made it up, exaggerated, any of these things, you must put that case to them in a cross-examination, so they have an opportunity to respond to it. And in the UK trial, for example, there were certain bits, certain parts of incidents, in what's referred to as incident 4, which is the flight incident. Certain bits were not put to Amber in cross-examination, and therefore perhaps didn't achieve the right result. And so it's interesting that the amount, as you put it, Christopher, the indulgence in the law that we've seen by a worldwide community with input, which has drawn us in, it's certainly drawn me in, to compare the two systems, to compare the law, and as we have here, two very different results and different defendants, although the subject matter is the same. That I have found that indulgence fascinating worldwide. So I absolutely agree.
Yeah, and that's the thing that, as a lawyer, that I struggle with, especially when I lose, and unfortunately I lose a lot in court, because
we all lose sometimes.
These are high stakes cases that we, and it's, if it was a clear outcome at the beginning, the parties would settle. So the cases that go to trial are truly the hardest ones. And but to me, it's a process. Justice is more about a process than the outcome. Yes. And after watching this whole trial, even if Johnny had lost, I would say that he got justice because he had a fair trial. And he did clear his name in the court of public opinion, but it wasn't outcome determinative for me. It was, I wanted him to win, but I wanted to see a fair process. Now, in the UK, Daniel, one question that I had, because I did watch your video, and that Amber Heard was obviously not a party in the UK. It was a suit against the publisher, The Sun, and I guess the author of this story. Yeah. And Amber Heard was not made a defendant. And the English judge had noted that Johnny, I guess, had the option of suing Amber and must have decided with counsel not to sue her. And so could Johnny have brought Amber into that suit? Was that truly an option that he had to name her a defendant in England?
Well, only if she had a an active part in the scripting of that article, and in particular the title, because it was a defamation suit, and the defamation came from the damage, the harm coming from the title of the article. So there's 2 points of proof, and first of all, it was on Johnny Depp to prove that there's harm, and then secondly, it shifts to the defendants in that case for whatever defense, and ultimately they relied on the statutory defense of truth. But if Amber was not party to the writing of the title, which is, again, there's a difference with the US UK trial. She, so far as I'm aware, had no real input to that title at all. So in that sense, there was no real prospect of a claim brought against her for the defamation, because she didn't write it, she didn't publish it, and so she could not have been a defendant. And so there was no other defendant, really, because it was written by one party, published by the other. Those became the defendants. If Johnny wanted to sue for that article, it had to be those 2 defendants. And so it set in motion a necessary set of evidence that came forward. And this is why I take issue with it, because throughout the judgment, there's argument that she was the effective opponent. And so it is a bit like fighting the wrong person. It's a bit like being in the ring with one person, but you're taking swipes at the crowd, and they can dodge you, they can avoid you, and that's the way I see it. That's exactly what happened. So I suppose, in a roundabout way, to continue the analogy, it wasn't a fair fight.
Yeah, and that's significant because he didn't have in the UK action a right of what you would call disclosure, and what we'd call discovery is this, compelled production of proof against her. So it was not a fair fight.
Well said. Sorry, and I stepped out for a second, but I was listening because sorry guys, I was on a call all day for 4 hours with my bank. Still not solved. But thank you guys for holding off, and a fascinating conversation. And a great question, Christopher, because I was wondering that too. Could they have done that? But no, because she didn't work on the article. She didn't write the article. It didn't, but it kind of feels like she did, because she's defined a wife, right? The WB term is because of her. So technically she wrote it because she accused it. It was very weird how tight they were. Since we're jumping into the UK topic, it was very weird to me how, like, in cahoots they were, and was like, Amber didn't have to do that, right? Like, she didn't have to defend the son, which is what was really interesting to me. The son could have tried to prove that without Amber Heard's involvement and been forced to do that, and they would have had a tougher time. But Amber, like, wasn't required to do that, correct?
Correct. And case in point, for anyone that did miss it, I talked about it in depth in my video, but it's paragraph 576 of the judgment, which is a long judgment, and that's not even sort of halfway through the judgment. But the argument, or the spin, if you like, that's going around, that all of the evidence, quote, that came in the UK trial, it's simply not true, because the wording in this part of the judgment itself was that there was argument from Mr. Sherborne that she was the effective opponent, and yet, in the judge's words, and yet she was not a party. She had no obligation to make disclosure, and she provided information to the defendants, the son and the author, at different times at her choice. And then, because she's not a party, she had no obligation for disclosure. But it goes on, Johnny Depp made an application for third-party disclosure against her. His application was unsuccessful. So in English, that means his lawyers drafted a document to say to the court, we need this information from her to be heard at this trial to make it fair. And the judge said no. So the idea that all the evidence was heard is nonsense, in my humble view.
And that's why at before the trial in Virginia, the judge would not allow the jury to hear that Johnny had lost the UK case. So Amber wanted the jury to hear that he had litigated in the UK against the son and lost. But Judge A said, no, we're not going to allow that because he didn't have an actual opportunity to litigate the same issues in England than he would in Virginia. So that's why the court found that it didn't correspond with our notions of a fair and actual litigation.
So very weird. So I was going to say, Daniel, that's weird because Elaine here is now trying to play your UK verdict as well. Johnny lost.
Exactly, but as Christopher just said, that they were two separate claims. They were completely different claims, albeit the fundamental underlying events were the same. But to put it in plain English, if two people had a fight, and then in one country one article was written about it which was factually incorrect, and in another country someone else wrote another article about it which was factually incorrect, they're two separate claims about the same fight. But the key point was one person that was involved in the fight was not involved in the claim in the UK trial. And another point which I brought into another video of mine, which I think is quite interesting actually, as part of the at least one of the Elaine interviews. I'm sure she did pretty much the same spin across them all, but the one that I listened to and chopped up in one of my videos, at one stage she says, we were not allowed to tell the jury about this UK trial, and that's unfair. But then later on in the same interview, 4 or 5 minutes later, she says, the jury, she says, almost word for word, I'm paraphrasing, but almost word for word, I have to believe that the jury went away and researched this. They had weekends, they had, whatever. So which is it? Do you believe they went away and researched it, in which case up pops the UK verdict and they would read about it? Or are you arguing, well, it's unfair because we couldn't tell them about the UK verdict? It's one or the other, it's not both. You're a lawyer, I'm a lawyer. We know that you can't have it both ways.
Well said. It's a good point because exactly she wants to say they're out there cheating. They're looking up all this stuff, but they could have looked up exactly her problem of all the evidence that they didn't find. She's assuming, and it's very telling, I think, actually, very telling that she's like, well, they looked up all the evidence that we tried to suppress and accepted, and ignored all the other evidence that I'm saying was suppressed because by her logic, looking up the information online would have revealed the so-called smoking gun she's claiming, and they would have been even more adamant that they, that's a very surprising and well said statement when you put it that way. And I'm going to use that in some arguments I've been having online with people who keep doing it because it's absurd. Welcome, Lewis. Good to have you here, sir. Welcome here.
Hi, Lewis.
And
Hello.
Kim is here.
Hello, gentlemen.
We're all three. I'm just going to sit back as these two smart lawyers give us all the intel because I have so much information I want to know. Before I pivot though to the ACLU, which I'll lean a little bit more on you, Christopher, since it's here, but I want to get Daniel's thoughts. I want to bring up Daniel's petition. For those that missed our video or his video, we can file for an appeal. Johnny doesn't even have to do it, from what I've learned through Daniel. If there's enough interest and we can do it, and we want to get some more signatures to sort of see, should we? I feel like this should be higher, guys. Maybe not, but please, mods, if you can, I'll put it in the link right now. If you believe in us revisiting this verdict, in this appeal, rather, there's the change.org petition you can sign. Daniel, again, just a real quick sell. Like, what is the point of this for you? Why should fans sign it, in your opinion?
So it's quite an unprecedented and quite a high bar, very unusual way of approaching the possibility of opening an appeal. So there was, long story short, there was an appeal case with a five judge appeal that said, in rare circumstances, we can reopen what we refer to as a final appeal, which is either a full appeal or permission to appeal or leave to appeal, which are covered by the same rule. And this can only be opened in very narrow circumstances, but the wording is very interesting. It's to avoid a real injustice. And if you take this scenario where you have a jury verdict, which, remember, every jurisdiction, so far as I'm aware, takes a jury verdict as the highest because of the burden and standard of proof, surely it follows, as a lawyer, Chris, you may agree or disagree with me, but surely it follows that a jury returning a verdict on what is ultimately a higher standard of proof should mean that the opposite decision on the same set of facts was an unjust decision. That's my take on it. And so there's a narrow window to convince the courts to allow this to be reopened, hence the petition.
What are your thoughts on it, Christopher? I know from a U.S. standpoint, do you think this is a smart call for us to revisit?
Well, yeah, I don't know the process in England, but the logic applies, because as we were talking earlier, Amber was not a party to the English case, and so he was fighting against the son, and the question of whether this title of him being a WB was substantially true, I think, was the question.
Right.
And now we've had a trial in Virginia by a jury with the burden of proof on Johnny Depp to not only establish the falsity of her claims, but to also show that she published or made those statements that they were knowingly false or with a reckless disregard for the truth. And we had 7 jurors who had to unanimously agree that he met his burden of proof. That is a very, very high bar to meet. And it does stand in conflict with the English court's conclusion. So that, to me, I mean, we have now an actually litigated dispute against the real party in interest by a unanimous jury, that this would seem that justice would require a re-examination of this claim against the son to see if justice was achieved there.
And just to break this down a little bit more, because there's quite a lot to conceptualize. So if we try to simplify it, we've got Johnny and Amber and the history between them and what was said about that history. In the UK, what was said about by a newspaper, and it's published by a newspaper. In the US, what was said by Amber in collaboration with someone else, but said by her. And so in your trial, it was a higher burden and standard of proof, but it was her words from her knowledge of the same events. And so in the UK, obviously it is another party writing a statement about the same events with a lower standard of proof. So if it's lower standard of proof to prove, it should be easier to topple. And because it's a different party and you're looking at the 2 decisions, they are at odds. And so if you've got a higher standard of proof in the US, that should top the decision in the UK, and that's my view on that.
One more thing I want to be clear on, Daniel, is because even as Johnny's saying on his posts here, time to move on, right, is what he's sort of...
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And I think a lot of people are like, well, let's move forward together. The reality, though, is he doesn't need to be part of this, right? The people of the UK could put this together and say, we feel like this wasn't fair. She defamed herself. She wasn't being honest. This case can proceed with the signatures and the people without even Johnny's involvement or approval, correct?
There is a potential there. As I say, it's very unusual. The courts can make orders of their own motion, which would include, although it's ordinarily done by an application by a party, but the courts can make an order of its own motion. So the idea of this petition is really it's to bring awareness and to make it clear that there are enough people that feel that this should be looked at, and the court can make a decision of its own motion. And if it does that and permits the appeal, then effectively the judgment could be nullified or set aside. Johnny need not then follow it through necessarily. He could withdraw the claim or whatever, but those are other issues. But overall, it's really the principle of upsetting, is the phrase that we use, this judgment, and that's really the element of justice here, because at the moment the judgment stands against him, and it stands in total contradiction to what you've got as a jury verdict on the same set of facts.
Well,
to
and
the highest.
speaking of upsetting, I wish we had Steph here, but I think I could speak for her in this, that she's very upset at how that ruling was come to. And I would think a lot of people in the UK would be upset too, to see, well, wait a second, what did we miss? Was she lying? Is there proof of her lying? Can we prove that? And honestly, even Judge Nichols, who a lot of us are mean to, feels like, hello, Judge Nichols, you should want this too. There's no reason you can't still be a hero here to say I was duped, you know?
Oh, quite right. Absolutely. And there is nothing wrong with someone standing up and saying, actually, I've now seen this. I've changed my mind. There is nothing insulting about having a judgment overturned. It does happen, but it usually happens either with the standard route is an error of law or an error of procedure, and in rare circumstances, new evidence, and in even rarer circumstances, to avoid a real injustice such as this. And I think this qualifies as one of those very unique one-in-a-lifetime cases, that this is so different that it's a real injustice. I mean, we've got, let's put numbers on it. We've got on the face of it, when the verdict came out, 15 million in his favor on the face of it. So, albeit, curtailed with statutory limitations, but still, on the face of it, that's what the jury said. In the jury's eyes, that's what it was worth. That is very different to the wording, which I will read out for you, but if I can find it quickly enough. It came down to a few words, paragraph 584. It came down to, it follows that this claim is dismissed. 7 words. That's what it came down to. 129 pages came down to those words. It follows that this claim's dismissed, as against $15 million awarded by a jury on the same set of facts. And tell me that's not a real injustice.
Yeah, it's something.
I see you cringing. That's right, isn't it? That's how it makes you feel. And that's why I say it should be a real injustice. Anyway, I'm taking too much time.
No, you're great. But I am going to pivot now. Speaking of injustices, even to me, an even worse injustice actually is the fact, I don't know if you're aware of the ACLU here, Daniel, but the ACLU is the American Civil Liberties Union, who's supposed to be standing up for due process and everybody having the right to a fair trial, etc. Usually for people who can't afford it or other minorities, etc. People don't have the means, and they basically worked in cahoots with Johnny Depp, with the Amber, to get funds and donations through the Me Too era to demonize and defame Johnny Depp. And so now we've talked about this in depth, Christopher. I want to get your thoughts on this latest update, because now they're seeking $86,000 from Johnny for legal fees following the subpoenas. Well, Johnny has replied. I got this tipped off from Laura B. We'll go there in a second, but exorbitant and unreasonable. He's refusing to pay the $86,000 to the ACLU. So he is fighting back on this, at least. Thank God. I understand why you might want to move on from other cases, but Christopher, I want to get your thoughts here on sort of this reaction from Team Depp saying, "Hell no, we're not paying your legal fees." What is your reaction to this?
Sure. So just on background, in the Virginia case, Johnny Depp wanted evidence from the ACLU. So they're not a party, they're a third party here witness. And so he sent a subpoena to them. It went into New York, which I assume is where they're headquartered. And so he wanted them to reveal how much money Amber Heard had donated, first off, because when Amber Heard made her statement in 2016, ACLU did a press release saying Amber Heard donates $3.5 million. So that's their headline. And so he wanted to know, well, how much did you actually get? Number one. Number two, he wanted to know what work the ACLU had done with the op-ed piece. And so he was stonewalled by the ACLU and its lawyers. He had to do extensive amount of litigation in New York to finally get this information. Now, when you subpoena a third party for production of records they have the right to reimbursement, and usually the law will specify a amount of money per page. And then if they had to do some research time, sometimes the statute will say, like in California, you get 25 cents a page, and I think like $25 an hour is a witness fee. And in New York, the law allows for some production expenses, which they're saying is $1,000. And Johnny says, no problem. I will pledge or even pay the $1,000. But they also added on attorney's fees. And the ACLU is saying because they claimed a privilege against his request, they said that they were working with Amber and they had a common interest and there was some kind of privilege against production, that they had to involve their lawyers at very high hourly rates. They added up to $85,000 and they want reimbursement for that. And Johnny's saying, no, I owe you $1,000. And I got to think the court is going to do the $1,000 and some, again, kind of retrieval fee. How much does it cost to sort through potentially, 100,000 emails of all these individuals who were involved and figure out which ones are relevant? And so some administrative hourly fee, but not $86,000.
So these were the fees here. Yeah, ridiculous requests here that came in from the document. Respondents are not entitled to all requested expenses. How do you think this is going to net out?
Well, I think that, they're going to get some basic reimbursement, like I say, maybe a few $1,000s or something like that, for their time and energy into producing the documents, because, again, they're not a party to this action. They were asked to produce the records, and they're entitled, like any of us who were asked to produce records in the U.S., to some, again, basic nominal reimbursement. The damage, though, is done to their reputation. So they have no credibility, I think, in my mind, based on their conduct in this case. And they owe him an apology. They should explain exactly their involvement and the harm that was caused by that. But again, they've taken no responsibility for this at all. And going after Johnny, who was really the victim of their misconduct, for their attorney's fees. So it's just causing more harm than they originally did.
Yeah, and what's interesting, as Laura points out here out pretty well, she says, look, we now have proof that ACL was coordinating and assisting Amber Heard with her litigation, which, if you pan down to this portion of the document, indeed does say that. Can he go after the ACLU, Christopher? Should he? I understand why he wants to move on from Amber, but just the cojones on ACLU to come at him for now fees after everything they sort of put him through is pretty amazing. Shouldn't they just take this one to the chin and moved on? And the fact that they're not, I know they're legally allowed to do it. Isn't this a bad look?
Yeah, they're saying that they stand up for rights, but they're really just a bully. And I don't think he knew of the evidence of their involvement when he sued in Virginia. And had he known about that, he might have added them as defendants. But he found this out later through this very discovery. But if he would have sued ACLU or the Washington Post, who published the op-ed, I doubt that he would have won, because, again, the standard of actual malice requires him to show that these other parties would have known that the statement was false or acted in reckless disregard for its truth. And, Amber and Johnny were truly the only two who knew the truth.
Right, but it is just odd because the ACLU was making drafts of this on Amber's behalf for the Washington Post. It does. I have issues with all of them, but I have the most umbrage with ACLU for the amount of their involvement, clearly not knowing, and being an agency that's supposed to, give everyone their shot and their due process, to write that so solicitously, and then have their own rep on the trial who was really calling it the ads. They were calling this whole thing like an ad. This was an ad. This was a way for them to get donations through other supporters through the Me Too movement. It does feel like there was some, maybe, I guess it has to be malice, right, is what you say, but it does feel like there was some carelessness to what was truthful, but that you're saying that's not enough.
Well, it has to be reckless disregard for the truth, and they obviously didn't do much diligence in vetting their ambassador for women's rights issues, because she had, this prior violent incident with her ex in the airport, and they didn't check Johnny's side. So much for his, liberties. They didn't check with him. So they may have acted with reckless disregard. My beef is more with the Washington Post, because when this publication received the op-ed draft, ACLU was involved, it was copied, so they knew that they had a hand in writing it, but they published it as if Amber was the sole author. And then after, it became clearer from the verdict that it was defamatory, they didn't immediately issue the editor's note. We called them out on that, and the next day they issued the editor's note, at least acknowledging that they had published a defamatory article. But then they immediately went out and attacked other commentators and attacked Johnny to basically try to cover themselves for the wrong that they did. And so my beef is with them, because they portray themselves as a legitimate media outlet, but they're not, in my mind.
Yeah, just to be clear, I share that frustration tenfold. That's so well said. I'm curious Daniel's take on that. Seeing the American press right now spin it like they are, and the Washington Post directly, does it surprise you?
Yeah, that's quite surprising, actually. And I share the view. I don't think that's good form, really. I mean, just looking at the involvement and the way that it's come out, I take umbrage just as you. I don't think that's a good approach at all.
And the critics will just say, "Oh, shut up, you two white guys," is literally what the Twitter is saying right now. Well, the misogyny of both of you. How dare you guys?
They're calling me white too, so
yeah, Lewis is white too. It's unbelievable. It's all a spin now, and I can't even believe it's becoming about race or politics. But that's how desperate, I guess, they're feeling. And the Washington Post, and I've had an argument on Twitter. I'm trying to get her on the show with a writer on Washington Post who seemed open. She's asking for permission. I'll be surprised if she gets it, or if she tells me she got it. But yeah, it's really depressing to see this new angle and this culture war brewing. I do want to get Kim and Lewis's thoughts. Kim, as the woman on this panel, are you surprised to see the word misogyny being thrown around as much as it is?
I mean, I understand why, but I don't think it's merited, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's always going to be a level of I have to pick my words very carefully here. Sorry. As a woman and as someone who does identify as a feminist from the perspective of wanting equality amongst all genders, you want to support other women, because we know that there's been a disadvantage. We know that there has been a lot of stuff that's held us down, but I don't think that this is one of those cases that we should be rallying behind Amber. I don't think I want to rally behind truth. I want to rally behind survivors. I want to rally behind all of that stuff. And I think if that's not what it is, that's not what it is. And I don't think that calling out a woman for being a liar is misogyny.
Yeah, well said. Lewis, have thoughts?
Well, Daniel's a martial artist here. He probably saw Rush Hour as a Jackie Chan fan, right?
Absolutely.
Remember he said you let people talk to see how full of
yes
get there. I think it's really about the people calling other people names. It's really about them when they call people like, "Oh, you're just a white guy." Well, I'm getting over 100,000 views on my videos. I'm not white, but the thing is, they only take like white guys' words. That's all they see. They don't see women as being there or people of color. They just say they do. So they're only seeing white dudes, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. I don't get it. It's really their problem. If they call you a name, like I said yesterday, keep going with it, because that means you won the debate. Once somebody calls you a name, they're done.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. People want the debate. They want the argument. I have this view. It's almost a philosophy. I've held the view for that long that people want the argument. They want the debate because they want the debate out there. And again, as Kim said, I understand why they want the argument and the debate out there. but there is a time and a place for that argument. I mean, let's take a tangent here. Andy, you were talking about all the alopecia issues yesterday.
Yes.
Well, guess what? I don't have alopecia, but I, have a particular hairstyle. But
Right, Lewis.
Right?
Right.
Yeah. So, but I have a history with that. I've got no problem talking about it. I understand why people might have difficulty talking about it. My head was burnt by a salon some years ago. Yes, I get some comments, really imaginative comments in my videos saying, Baldy, whatever. I don't care, but I understand why some people do care. Okay, so there is a time and a place for the argument. There are people that are, sexist and feminist and racist and whatever, but there's time and a place for those arguments, and sometimes they're not founded. Sometimes arguments are made without any basis. Allegations are made without any factual basis. They are false allegations.
I do feel, though, in America, the people who accuse others of being misogynist and racist and stuff, you find out later on that they are exactly what they accuse others of being. I don't know if it's the same in the UK.
I mean, it happens a lot. It does happen more often.
Most of the time.
Projection is powerful.
Yeah. It's like they're projecting. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of articles right now I'm reading that I'm just gobsmacked by. I'm just like, I can't even believe the take that's happening. And all to defend Amber. And it's so weird. The only other sort of real case I feel of justice, I use that word lightly because he never actually served the time, but is the Jussie Smollett case. Like, I feel like that was one time, I don't know if you followed that one, Daniel, but I feel like that was one time when the verdict came, no one was surprised. No one was surprised, and we all sort of seemingly some more quieter than others, accepted it. You know what I mean? It was what it was, and there wasn't like movements and Jussie Smollett. I stand with Jussie as loudly as there is right now with Amber, because I do believe that it was a crack in an armor that they've established in this Me Too movement. And in the power is really what I think it is, because again, you got to go back to the fact that Roberta Kaplan, who was leading the Time's Up movement, was repping Amber Heard, and then she left the case at a certain point because I believe she was getting nervous and was like, I might need to distance myself from her. And then as sort of she got some traction in the UK, which I think surprised everybody, she was back there making some more statements. And then look what ended up happening. Roberta Kaplan removes herself from Time's Up because she was silencing victims of Andrew Cuomo. Like, you realize just the power a lot of these movements are contributing, and the corruption. And then there's a lot of entities, I think Washington Post, et cetera, some of these extreme liberal mouthpieces online. It's just sad. You think they're doing real journalism and they care, but no, they're in their own silo, just like they're screaming at the extreme Trump supporters who are in their own silos. It's why I can no longer really support myself as a liberal, and I don't call myself a conservative, because if you're not part of one of the extreme sides, you're now the enemy. And you have all these, I feel like, bad actors out there trying to use liberalism or conservatism to scream, their motives. And it's really scary. And I hope you guys will, I think that's what part of the reason we've done really well with this trial is we cut through that bullshit. And we admitted, yeah, some of the shit Johnny did wasn't good. Yeah, we addressed some of that. We really, and we really tried to, not always just be fair. Some people got mad at me for it, but I'm glad we were honest about this trial. But it's so discouraging to see so many outlets like the Washington Post. I'm just so disappointed in them and how just shady they are. Like they did a whole piece on me on online creators, and they completely shit on us. And then they put our alleged salaries in there to try and shame it. And bravo to you, Christopher, when you pointed that out. I was sort of saving that as a trump card if I get that woman on. Where the hell's their? Let's see their royalties on how much they made on that op-ed piece, right, Christopher? It's insane. Yep. I mean, go ahead and share that piece because it's a great one.
Well, so when we saw the Washington Post coming out and bashing, the internet journalism and saying, well, oh, wow, people are monetizing their YouTube content and that this is somehow proof that this is wrong. And so I had pointed out that in this defamatory 2018 op-ed that the Washington Post had monetized that. And there's ads all over it. And, you know, and this was even as of a few days ago, after it had been determined to be defamatory, they continue to monetize the defamatory content. And while they're then publishing stories saying that others are doing wrong by monetizing content, talking about the trial. And none of us, hopefully, have defamed anybody. We're just talking about the trial. And so what I've seen, and I'm sure is the truth for all of you, you know, some of us have actually watched every moment of the trial. Most people have not. Right. And they've heard about the trial and they're like, why does this keep coming on my feed? Why do people keep talking about it? And they're annoyed by it. And those are the ones that are susceptible to these false headlines. Mm-hmm. And because they read the false headline and then they make a conclusion, and we talk to people like us all the time. And there are very powerful forces. I mean, Amber Heard is not much of a celebrity anymore, so she doesn't have much of a PR machine herself, but the ACLU and Washington Post do. And they are complicit in this story. They're witnesses. They really helped her defame this guy. And now they have a reputation to protect. So they are, like you say, the mouthpieces that are going out there and attacking and putting in these false statements, that hoping that other people will bite at that. And there's plenty of people who will bite at it because they're inclined to believe that Johnny Depp has done something wrong because he's taken drugs. And that's the whole, that's the bite that they'll go after.
Or as Kathy Griffin will just say, oh, look at that booze bag. It's just like disgusting what the levels they're resorting to shame his alcoholism, which is a serious problem for a lot of people in the world. And let's just make a joke about him looking like a booze bag because I don't agree with him. It's sickening. How is it like in the UK? Is it better, worse, the same? Do you trust your media like we do?
I think there's a mix of the same, and there are some. I mean, there are some that try to be neutral. There are obviously some left and right, but I think a key point is that of the reader, the consumer, the information consumer, because a lot of them are what I call casual or superficial readers that will already have preconceived ideas on a number of different things, such as alcoholism and various other things. And so when they see a headline, they read half of it, they assume the other half, or they read bits of it and they assume the story, they assume they were right all along, and they will be fed by what they want. And let's not forget that these algorithms that deliver up this news, it will not deliver, you know, the man or woman next door the same news that they deliver me. It's going to be personalized, and these algorithms are so good at doing that. They know what these people's personal traits are, what their preferences are, what their prejudices are, what is likely to make them tick, happy, angry, and they play on the emotions. And so they feed into those things to almost just prove that they were right in what they were going to think all along, regardless of what the evidence says, which is what I take issue with, because I said in one of my videos, if this trial came out that actually, yeah, the jury believed every word of Amber, that Johnny did all these things, I'd still do videos, but they'd take a different angle. They would be like, well, now we've got two different jurisdictions, two different defendants. We've got, you know, the same underlying facts, two defendants here, Amber over here, jury versus a judge and whatever, and they all decided the same thing. Wow, that's powerful if that were the case. But it's not. And so I would have covered it differently. So I don't have those prejudices. I wouldn't approach it with those prejudices. But a lot of people approach the news like that. And so you get, people read different newspapers for a reason, right? They read one newspaper over another because they expect what it's going to publish, and they like it, and they like those views. They follow those views. And so they play to them.
Daniel, sorry, I had your petition up during my feed yesterday, and there was a debate. How effective is the change.org petition? Does the UK law, do they look at that seriously? Like if it reaches 1 million or whatever, is that enough to change, you know, make this happen? Because there's a lot of US people signing it as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I've already had one success with such a thing, and you know, you got it up on screen there. If you go to I think if you can find my name on there, Andy, actually, I think it should say, if you scroll down a bit, it says Black Belt Barrister started the petition. If you click my name, and you should see other petitions that I started. Yeah, if it loads, it should load, maybe refresh it. No, that's still the.
I click your name.
Yeah, no, there's. I mean, I can probably ping it you on Twitter. Anyway, I'll explain it while I send you the link. But there's another petition that I started, which, without boring you with all the details, but the our National Health Service was planning to sell access to medical data. And they sort of did this relatively quietly without really publishing it or publicizing it. And I caught wind of it and thought, hang on a minute, this is not good. So I created a similar petition for this, and it got just shy of 240,000 signatures. That's the one.
Yeah.
And you can see on the right, we declared victory. That wasn't, it wasn't me saying, hey, look, everybody, we won. That was change.org saying we won, because whilst the media didn't reference me, they did put this whole plan on hold within the same week.
Wow.
So they could have referenced me, but they didn't. I suspect that it was me, but within the same week or two, they put this plan on hold. So change.org took that as a success. So short answer, yes, these things do work. And I know that it wasn't just people in the UK that signed this petition, but they do work.
There is, did you hear that? There is hope. We have, what is this? We have 20,000 people watching right now. 22,000 people. Let's get this number back up. Let's make a difference here. Let's try to do right the UK wrong in this for Steph, for Daniel, for all the amazing UK people out there who stand for truth. What Justice Nichols did there, I just feel like he made a mistake. It's okay to make mistakes. Just own up to them. And here's our chance to really reopen this and look into this more closely. And who knows? Maybe there's also. What about the Australia perjury charges and things that are happening, Daniel? Can that have an effect to this too potentially?
Well, it must do, because as I've said, and Christopher will know, Louis, you'll know very well. Well, you'll all know very well that if you've got any kind of bad character, any kind of conviction, be it current, previous, whatever, it should go against your character, your credibility, and everything else. Now, throughout this UK judgment, there was an extensive section talking about credibility, and most of it came to the result, and therefore it doesn't impinge on Ms. Heard's credibility. And with respect, I think it should have. And certainly these Australian proceedings certainly should, because, perjury is as serious as it gets. I mean, lying to any authority is pretty serious. And let's not, forget that she pleaded guilty to importing these dogs to Australia, it's in effect, it's going against a state's or an authority's rules and regulations, which is serious in itself. That alone should call into serious question, all of the credibility of all of the evidence provided by that particular party, in other words, Amber Heard. And so if that being the case, and if that evidence were to fall away, that should have a massive bearing. I mean, it goes against logic to say otherwise.
Guys, what an amazing show. I want to make sure we promote that petition really hard. Thank you to Black Belt Barrister for coming here. Make sure we get those signatures up to see if we can get that appeal for Johnny. Also got to thank Christopher Melcher, that lawyer go check out Tragos Law on YouTube or Twitter, as well as Christopher and Black Belt Barrister. Amazing to have him on. What a fantastic conversation. In addition to Steph the Alter Nerd, it's Kim and Louis Lecca over at Nerd Report. This was a fantastic show. If you missed the full full show, it just means I trimmed it. What you can do is if you missed this live, you can hit the join button, become a member today, hit the join, pick a level, you'll support the channel, and you'll always get our member-only replays, which are available the next day. It's just sort of a way to tighten the videos and still give you all the stuff that you missed. Thank you guys so much for watching, you beautiful people. If you're watching live, you're going to go on over to Nerd Report to help him out. He'll be taking calls. If you're watching on the replay, click on one of these. I put videos there someday. I just wish YouTube would have automatic end cards and make it so much easier. But in the meanwhile,